I can do things at WED without asking anybody, even my wife.
Coney Island, world's biggest barrel of
and
fun.
Anywhere else your imagination takes you.
Okay, we've done that now. To get the whole show now, you hurry, hurry, hurry.
Anything's possible in Disneyland.
Welcome aboard the Themed Attraction Podcast, where we take you for a ride through the wunderbar world of theme park design, that is. You've just climbed aboard a cruise of discovery and discussion with theme park industry masters of the craft. I'm your skipper, Freddy Martin, and sailing with me as always is theme park designer, master planner, and chief creative officer of Storyland Studios, Mel McGowan. What's on the horizon for us today, Mel?
Well, ach du lieber, Freddy, we've got a real treat for our passengers today. Our guest is creative director and project consultant, Chris Lange. Chris and I both grew up in Germany, a little bit after each other, but Chris cut his teeth in the theme park industry, starting off in a scenic fabrication shop in Germany before being tapped internationally to design and implement a pretty impressive string of major destinations around the world. And when I say around the world, I am serious. Chris has been creative director for Merlin Entertainments, Mack Solutions, the Genting Groups. He's led projects in California, Malaysia, Singapore, South Korea, and served as senior art director for India's first ever theme park project, Adlab's Imagica. Most recently, he headed up the resort development for Europa-Park's new water park, Rulantica.
Wow. With all these stories, I think we're going to need a bigger boat. Okay, folks, keep your hands, arms, feet, and legs inside the boat, because this episode is about to leave the dock. Hit it, Sam. So, Mel, here we are, a couple weeks out from a whole bunch of wild, giant theme park announcements and press surrounding like D23 and stuff like that. Disney, talking about their massive Epcot retheming. We've got a Star Wars hotel and details about that. Everybody kind of wants us to compete with that. So you also have Universal's fantastic Epic Universe, fourth gate for Universal in Florida. And just recently, Six Flags, huge. They've got a ton of new rides. They're trying to make sure that they're heard among all the noise. New park. Yeah, and a brand new park. I mean, it continues to grow. But here's what's funny. I think if you ask the average American theme park goer, they might think that these are the big brands, that these are all there is. That if you're not Disney, Universal, even Six Flags, that's it. Those are the theme parks. But that's not the case, really, is it?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, there is your local park, typically a Six Flags, Cedar Fair, and then you have these kind of nationally known brands, whether it's SeaWorld, Disney, Universal. But the reality is, as a human species, we are wired to want to connect to narrative and story. And quite rapidly over the last 10, 20 years, we've helped take that show on the road. And again, the number of major groups out there. I was looking through the latest Themed Entertainment Association global attractions attendance reports. I think they were noting that just with the top 10 operators, and that doesn't include some major destinations like Europa-Park, like Efteling, but just the top 10 theme park chains drew over 500 million people for the first time last year, and that's kind of a big deal. And again, to me, it just blows my mind that you could have Disney go to mainland China, the capital of communism, and have the highest attended theme park first year attendance ever with Shanghai Disneyland. Just the idea that these stories are so universal that they connect across so many different cultural and geographic lines is a really powerful thing.
Yeah. And the markets continue to grow. You see it, like in our intro, we talked about Chris's, there's a first theme park, what could be considered a theme park in India. And just consider the number of people, the market that could be as people are finding themselves with more disposable income. They're finding themselves in economies where they want to go and enjoy a day out at the park.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I remember as a kid, my mom told me to finish my plate, because of the starving children in China. Well, I've adopted a couple, but China is, maturing. The economy's developing. There's, that rising middle class. There's families that have some discretionary income, and again, not just China, but where we go, India, around the world, Vietnam, and so it is exciting as we see families to be able to, have that means and that margin to go to a place where they can kind of set the cares aside and make some memories together. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's great. Well, our guest today is Chris Lange. So Chris Lange, learn a little bit more about him as we go. But here's how I met him. I was asked to write an article about water parks and water park technologies, and technology stories can be pretty dry, but it's about wet technologies. So I wanted to make it interesting, but I got turned on to Chris Lange, said, hey, talk to him. He's a water park guy. It was not what I expected. I mean, I expected to talk to somebody who knew something about slides and wave pools. Instead, I just found out that I just in my view, discovered one of the great theme park creative directors working in the industry, and he's had so much experience creating parks around the world.
Well, when you don't have the tethers of kid and family, and you can fly anywhere in the world, and there is a whole wide world out there that Chris has tapped into, and
Sure.
I appreciate his roots in the scenic shop, knowing how things actually get put together and how things are attached, and how to build project estimates up from the ground up. And I think that idea of not just being a great creative, a decent or a great artist, but again, to have that left and right brain, both lobes fully intact, I think is something that I really resonate with. We've really held pretty close to our chest here at Storyland to be able to kind of go from dream to dedication day, keeping things like budget, scope, and schedule, kind of in sight the whole time. And again, I think that's one of the reasons for Chris's success across some pretty diverse landscapes. Merlin, the Legoland Discovery Centers. I mean, definitely one of his brain childs. That is unique to do that indoor micro park context.
Right.
It's definitely not a museum. It's definitely not an indoor playground. I mean, these actually have flat rides. They've got motion simulator rides, but most importantly, they let you touch that Lego experience and expand on it. The 20th Century Movie Park in Malaysia that I understand post Disney has finally figured stuff out, and I think they're removing the Fox name, but at least a lot of the heavy lifting as far as creatively. That even when we did the interview, Chris was a little nervous about the status of where that stuff was. I'm glad that we're going to be able to see his handiwork out there pretty soon. Again, we mentioned India's first theme park, but we both collaborated on the Sea Life Aquarium down here in Southern California at Carlsbad at Legoland. We love that little place, and we've been excited to be able to do some of their more recent updates out there. But again, you wouldn't expect this German guy to thrive in the Smoky Mountains, but he's been able to collaborate with great friends like Herschend at Dollywood. But again, he's really made quite a mark at Europa-Park. And again, that's one of my childhood parks. And for those of you that don't know, I mean, this is every bit as epic as Universal, as a Disney. I mean, this is in some ways, Disneyland Paris is beautiful and amazing, but this is some homegrown goodness and real family magic out there in kind of a backwoods location in Germany that started off as a pretty humble little children's landscape garden park, and is kind of the best of, I don't know, it reminds me of like a World Showcase / Islands of Adventure kind of merged into one. Right. It really is it's just an amazing park and project. And again, to expand beyond that ride park and to open up really, again, one of the finest indoor-outdoor themed water parks, I think is really fresh, especially with the original backstory that he'll talk about. So I'm excited.
Well, let's get the boat on the water, shall we? We're headed back to the Blue Sky Loft at Storyland Studios for our interview with Chris Lange. Well, Chris, it's great to have you here in the Storyland Studios Blue Sky Loft. Once again, interviewing for the Themed Attraction podcast. It's very exciting to have you here. Can't wait to get started.
Well, I'm super excited too because we have some shared roots and DNA. I don't know if we've really talked about it, but I grew up in Germany, and some of my earliest memories are with Legos and Europa-Park and a lot of the same place that you kind of started in the industry. So can't wait to talk about those shared genetic roots.
I think I'm even more excited than you two coming down here and feeling honored. So awesome.
And I know you were at Imagineering yesterday. It is a hike from Glendale down to our dig. So really appreciate you making the drive.
I think it was good that I actually even left an hour earlier than we originally planned. So, but it was like shorter than I expected it.
Yeah.
So people warned me like, you should leave 3 hours ahead. I'm like, no, but I came here in time. I could get my coffee on the way and being all fresh now.
Yeah. For listeners around the world, to them, LA is just one city maybe, but to get from Six Flags, Magic Mountain, I know where you were up even north of WDI, to Storyland Studios, which is kind of between LA and San Diego.
Yeah.
3 hours would be doing pretty good.
Yeah, that's right. And a little program note for our listeners. We are live in the Blue Sky Loft, and today it looks like there's a lot of stuff going on down there. So if you hear any saws banging around of materials or loud machines, that's okay.
Those are just sound effects.
Those are sound effects. It's
to make you think.
Live sound effects. You're really here with us. So, Chris, we met because we were doing an interview for an article for In Park Magazine. You were sharing with me about technologies in water parks, but just very quickly realized that you've got so much more vast experience. So I want to first kick in and get a little bit of the backstory. Who are you? Where'd you come from? And how'd you get into this themed entertainment mess?
I think it's great that we're actually now here in southern Los Angeles because to me, one moment where it all started was certainly, when my parents took me when I was 14. I just did the math in the car again, down to Disneyland.
Wow.
And so that was certainly a life-changing experience with me. And funny enough, now it makes all sense. But I remember when I was 6 or 5, I drove my mom nuts, basically building Christmas markets, German Christmas markets, so carousels, Ferris wheels,
I grew up with the Christkindl market in Nuremberg.
Out of my Legos and out of my Stabilo and whatever I could get to build stuff and put it under the Christmas tree. So there was basically zero space for presents anymore. And it's funny, and this thing just grow year by year, and it got bigger. And, so I guess, the passion for amusement and for rides and so on, it's started very, very early on. No, but certainly of course, going to Disneyland when I was 14, I kind of back then said to my mom, this is where I want to live and die. I think I even said I want to die here. But truth is, I have grown up in east of Germany. So I was 11 when the wall came down. And, I was always interested in theater. And, if that event would have never happened, I would have probably, ended up in, we do have, a very famous movie studio just outside of Berlin, Studio Babelsberg. We have Fritz Lang did Metropolis and all those, crazy black and white movies back then. So, that was always something which I really loved and going. Because they had a very cheap version of a studio tour even back then in Eastern times, and so it's so kind of there was always the passion for theater and certainly for amusement, and then seeing this combined the placemaking and with the rides and telling the stories in a Disneyland, though also Universal Studios was very impressing to me as a little boy back then.
Well, I'm going to guess that you played with a few Lego blocks as a kid. I know for me, Legoland. When I was a kid, there was only one. It was in Billund, Denmark, and that was like Mecca. I never actually got to go, but when I was like 14, we did the road trip to Phantasialand, which I'm not even sure if that's how it's pronounced, but it was full of wonderful cut and paste and IP lifts from Disneyland, but that was as close as I got around that age. But still, plenty of inspiration.
Phantasialand, absolutely. Like I remember my parents could travel. I think I probably was like 9 or 8. They could see family over in West Germany, which lived like close to Cologne. And so, they did go with them to Phantasialand. So they came back with the kind of souvenir book. And I was like so mad. I was so mad. I'm like,
you didn't get to go.
I don't want to I don't want to see our family. I want to go to Phantasialand, right? I think this was like back then probably like the first kind of encounter to like a theme park. And like Phantasialand back then 30 years ago was much different than what it is like today, right? So it started like a family business, with like puppeteers. So they really had those marionette figures.
Oh, wow.
And like really kind of very storytelling and very beautiful, like they...
Well, what I remember, their Main Street USA was Old Berlin.
Yep.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there was a version of the Brandenburger Gate.
That was the castle.
Exactly. That was the Vinny at the end. Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, that's incredible. That's really very a special way to bring in the actual history of the area to make that the storytelling focus. That's really special.
And I remember, like again, like I don't know, like the park nowadays is maybe like 30% of it used to be like, so like they're really investing and like doing new great attractions. But back then they had some really wacky, fantastic rides. I remember like a gondola ride, like through like 1001 Night.
Yeah.
And it was
like a
really,
Peter Pan homage.
It was like Peter Pan, but like they didn't have like animatronics. They really had like marionettes, like puppets on strings. Yeah. And so they would like move those figures like on strings, but like beautiful sets, like very, like beautiful designed. And that was just like, I remember that was magical.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember a odd raft ride that was kind of like a Rivers of America, but then you'd stumble on these Jungle Cruise scenes, of like elephants and
very
it was like a hybrid of the Rivers of America and the Jungle
Rivers
Cruise.
of everywhere.
But like back in the days, like you could not like affordable travel to Los Angeles or Orlando to see like the real Disney. So of course, like a lot of those European parks and like German parks, of course, they got highly inspired and just like took a lot of scenes, like I remember exactly like that boat ride, flume ride you're talking about, having the scene where the rhino is chasing up the people on the tree, which is exactly what you have here in Jungle Cruise, and
the
like
point in the end.
And like they have it at Phantasialand, they have it at Europa-Park, because like 30 years ago nobody would like go and see
nobody
the
would
real
notice.
thing.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I think Tony Baxter was saying they didn't even bother dealing with the Jungle Cruise at Disneyland Paris.
Oh, because they already
it had been done.
It had been done.
Yeah, but I think that's also like like having that history in European parks, German parks. So they kind of started with like copying or being inspired with like a lot of like Disney or American parks, but then now they all, since we can travel and we know like, oh, this round golf ball originated in Epcot, and so like you would not do that anymore these days. So a lot of those parks like kind of fixing those things and like being more original and telling their own stories.
Well, there almost seems to be a very unique sense of place, a sense of being Europe that's really celebrated. And I do have some early members of Europa-Park though, and it's still even providing inspiration for some of the parks we're working on today of kind of this new genre of
conversation quite a bit,
park that's below the Disney Universal level and not quite a Six Flags ride park. But when Europa opened, it really was kind of like some of these castle British parks. It was really this garden park, that was built around like a former, historic.
It's like castle. Funny, like there is a real castle from 1442. So it's like bloody old.
Balthazar.
And there's Schloss Balthasar, exactly. And there's the Castle Garden, which needs to stay as a garden. So like there's no chance they could ever like put a ride in there, which I think is right, because actually people really love to come there, lay under the trees, do their picnic. So it's for Europa-Park, which is like a very busy park in the high season. So it's nice that there's some like kind of escape spaces where you can really like chill and relax from a busy theme park circus. And with Europa-Park, it really started as a more like a landscaping park. And funny enough, it always has been named Europa-Park, but actually the concept of showing different European countries just came
wasn't even there
many years later.
Really?
Yeah. So there was like a stage designer, very famous, also like Ulrich Damrauer. And he brought basically the idea, and I think they started, if I remember correctly, with the Italian kind of land, with the Italian area.
That was brand new when I first went.
And so that's
and
many years ago. You must have been very small back then.
I was very small, and I'm now very old. But yeah, this is 70s we're talking about, people.
Yeah, you know, like Europa opened in 75, so it's and you know, they developed and they became just like more original.
Yeah,
and that was like the beauty when Michael Mack asked me 4 years ago if I want to join them. You know, just in order to bring more storytelling and like be more original, because I think, and I worked on some big IPs and you know, which is always fun, you know, like to find your way to translate those into like a ride or a themed area and so on. But certainly what I really enjoyed at Europa-Park is actually coming up with a new IP. And we did that like very successful. Like just like one example is, for example, like last year, the refurbishment of our French neighborhood, which has been designed by Ulrich Damrau, like very beautiful, but also, of course, back then to their financial situation. So, like, of course, like things might look a little bit more simple, like because like now it's a much more stable park, and of course we can like have a better finance and like investments, which makes things look more pretty. And back then, like they found their way and their style to like, you know, like tell a French neighborhood. And then last year, with the renovation of the Eurosat coaster, we said, you know, like if we like gonna like touch that coaster, we wanna like really reinvent and like upgrade and re-imagineer the entire area, which was awesome. And like talking about IPs, so there was a dinosaur ride in the ground floor of that indoor coaster, which called very original Universe of Energies. The entrance was like
inspired
rock work
by the Exxon Pavilion,
which is not existing anymore now. So like you can, so that it would have been no rip off anymore. No, but like you would like go into like a dark cave and then travel back in time and like have dinosaurs like in a jungle, and which like to me had nothing to do, like it should not belong in a French area in the park, because there's nothing French about that. And so basically what we did is like, you know, we of course like built complete new facades and like queue lines and so on, and came up with the story, which is like sets place in the Alsace, which is kind of the neighbor over in France. Like we're only 5 minutes away from the River Rhine. And so on the other side of the River Rhine, there's the Alsace. And we created a beautiful storyline like which takes place in the Alsace. So there's this old lady, she has this wacky shop. And as you walk through the shop, you see like, oh, there's dinosaur bones, and where's this coming from? And where does she has this gigantic dinosaur egg? Till you like then bought the right vehicle and make it through her garden. And in her garden, which would have been like naturally like in that area like a vineyard, like she's keeping all those dinosaurs, and they're all happy and they eat cake and like, and you know, we were like happy to do a children's illustration book, which was one of the top sellers last year on Amazon in Germany. And we now there's even like a TV series coming out with that IP.
That's tremendous. That's great.
And that's really fun if you like, you know, have the team and you develop those ideas. And there's obviously like, you know, a lot of people involved. At Europa-Park, there's also Mack Media, which is like really like kind of a media driving component with all of that, to see how can we like not just tell the stories inside the theme park, also like, you know, like get it like home to the people. And that's just like a great example of how it works, not getting a movie IP, which is like happen very, very often, of course, those days, which is almost like the safe bet.
Yeah, right.
You know, get a movie IP, and like people will hopefully come to your park, or they come these days, obviously. And that's like for creative director, for me, it was just like really pure joy to like develop original content.
Well, I am, one of the things as we're talking, I'm just totally fascinated because I know, again, you were at Six Flags Magic Mountain yesterday, which opened in 71.
Yeah, I think it's 71.
But anyways, they opened around the same era, Magic Mountain and Europa. And in a way, they kind of had some similar roots as far as starting off as these kind of garden parks with relatively gentle theming and gentle rides. But it's just fascinating to me how the European parks have kind of evolved so differently than a lot of the American parks in terms of increasing levels of investment, sophistication, immersion of local, soil-specific, kind of contextual storytelling. Tell me how that contrasts with your first trip to Magic Mountain and your impression of
right.
It's like I've never been. I drove by, like when you take the slower route up to San Francisco,
right.
You drive by and like, just like
you're looking at that Wally
like
World panorama.
No, but like just the outline of like a coaster park,
right.
of course, excites you.
Yeah,
like
right.
even it's just the steel, it's my Jesus steel coaster, but it's still fun, right?
Steel.
So you drove by there a couple of times.
You see
just
every
like
day. Yeah.
Looked over and like, okay, one day I need to go. And like we went 2 days ago actually to see it for the first time. And like I have to confess, it was my first Six Flags park. And, of course, it's different. It's different than a Disneyland. It's different from a Europa-Park or like other European parks. But, I think those things also have their market, and just also think from a ticket price.
Yeah.
I mean, like with those other big parks, if it's the Universals or the Disneys, where is it going to end? If you build an attraction which costs you like 1.3 billion, which is beautiful, but like of course like you have to, you have to make the math, and I think and it's great that it's done, but I think also like with those other parks, the Six Flags, there's people like having their annual pass and they just go there after work to get a kick and ride a coaster and have a good time, and And I did see where those parks comes from. When you said like back in the 70s, they were a little different, and like there is some beautiful landscaping. There's some really great placemaking in some areas, and then some areas they're just like try, in a way to like put an IP on things, and there's some original things. Like one reason was like really going to see the Justice League ride, which is of course like a fantastic addition, and which is a fun ride. And I appreciate kind of a coaster park, a steel park takes that risk of putting a dark ride in there.
Yeah, their very first dark ride.
But it was like popular and people loved it. And maybe it opens up for a little bit more like of these ways of more storytelling attraction. Because I think like obviously like a coaster, and like I think.
Well, John and Rich are good friends, and over at Sally Corporation, and I know it's been a crusade of theirs to bring back some family dark rides back into the U.S. regional park industry. So just kudos to them for even pulling that multi-year, arm twisting.
Yeah, and then it just spread to all the Six Flags. I don't know if every single one has it now, but it became a nice copy and paste franchise.
And they did develop their product, right?
Yeah.
I mean, just like they started a couple like years ago in Australia. It's like the test try, and then just like from every ride they put in, they just like evolved and made it better.
Yeah.
And then now they have like the version here in Six Flags Mountain, and I think just like dealing with that and just like like having the long breath and to force that and to follow that, again, as I say, kudos to like John and his entire team over at Sally.
Yeah, and again, for just an average park goer, it's easy to compare that up against a Disney or Universal attraction. But when you realize that, if say you're at a Six Flags St. Louis, you're talking a park like 1/20th the attendance of a Disney or Universal
Seasonal and
Park.
everything.
And again, the investment, I don't know if it's 1/20th, but it very well could be. And to still pull something off through the layers of approval of working with a DC or a, whatever Hollywood IP.
But like, walking around there yesterday, like in the end, like people seem to be very happy. Of course, I'm not a Steel Park fan because I'm a storyteller and I wish there was more theming and there was like better quality of rock work and the character plaster wasn't like the way I would have done it and so on. So I get all that. And that in the end has to do with budget. But like funny enough, like people, they were eating, they were sitting there, they were laughing, and they were like even like running, and there was like no people, like there was no queue lines, but they're running to the coasters.
And by the way, this was we're in a heat wave. It was 100 degrees plus when you were there. So and that
I wish I would have gone to the water park because that was like looked much more refreshing.
Yeah, that's right.
One of the design leaders on the water park, and actually for a good chunk of time there at Magic Mountain was Kevin Barbie, another associate of yours who, in addition to his stint with Magic Mountain, went on to do lead creatively the Universal Studios Singapore. You guys had a chance to work on a certain IP, Fox, that's now under the Disney umbrella. Tell us those war stories.
I met Kevin many, many years ago, but then I had the pleasure of going to Singapore, where Genting Singapore has their headquarters, and Kevin was leading basically the in-house design agency, creative development department, IMRS. And I was working for IMRS for 1.5 years almost, working on this Fox Park. And I think we, nobody knows where this journey ends and under what name, umbrella, whatever it's going to open. But it was really, I truly enjoyed that because we created some really cool rides, very, I think a great use of different ride systems. Also some for me, for example, that was the first time I could really have a team of engineers, designing a prototyping ride system. So there's a couple of ride systems in that park, which I had really the pleasure, and I know that doesn't happen so often in a career, in your lifetime, where you really have a whole team of engineers from a great company, designing something which nobody has done before. And which, because you think this is the best fit for that particular IP. And so just that was just fun working with those people there, meeting new industry friends, and but really trying the best to fit those Fox IPs and Blue Sky IPs.
Well, what are some of your favorite applications of some of those IPs that you're allowed to talk about? Because they were almost built and ready to open.
Yeah, what can you see from the gondola when you swing over? I mean, obviously, there's the big Ice Age mountain with the coaster in.
Yeah.
And,
not such a big secret.
Which has also been on the, obviously, concept art published and so on. But for me, for example, Ice Age, Snow Mountain, and, those ride vehicles, they were themed as acorns. And I think that just made very much sense. You would really hide the tracks and give the guests the feeling they're just sliding down those slopes and those ice things in their acorns. And I think that's a great example to make most sense of an IP and use the right system. So that's really naturally, it feels natural you would do that. And of course there's also other rides with the Ice Age IP which are even more fun, but just I think that coaster, it's just Big Thunder Mountain, it is a railroad, and this is why there's tracks. And I think this is how it should be if you try to really immersively tell a story with a coaster.
This is really kind of a unique historic moment because I don't know if there's ever been a park that cooked, that done, that built that is literally now in limbo in terms of what's going to happen with the IP negotiations between Disney and Fox. So personally, I can't wait to go visit and just see what happens at the end of that story. But that's just fascinating.
That's tremendous.
You do have you do create parks, and then there's value engineering or a change of IP.
Right.
here and there, but like really that it's like fundamentally like changing from scratch basically and stripping all the IP. I think that never really happened before in our lifetime, I guess. So
The closest precedent I can think of is, Rick Bastrop. We were interviewing him on the MGM Grand Movie World, I think was the original name. And then they similar negotiations with Disney, and they had to pull back the notion that it was a movie studios based park. So it was kind of Apocalypse Now, but you couldn't really call it that. And
it happened before in there was a Warner Brothers movie world in Germany.
That's right.
Just like very close to Fantasia Land.
A lot of friends,
down in
Ryan
Bottrop.
Harmon and Bruce Green worked on that one.
And again, that was also a beautiful park. And they had like some classic Warner Brothers like IPs like a Batman, Great Batman Ride and so on. Same as down in Australia, which is still Warner Brothers. And when they lost the IP or decided not to pay the fees anymore and like make it movie world, they had to be creative. And I think some things worked out, some things not so good to like strip all those IPs. Funny enough, and I worked on a couple of projects down there. They were like changing directions also. So they had this time where they then didn't use Warner Bros. Anymore, but got other IPs in, like Nickelodeon and those things. And then they had a time where okay, we want to completely go away from the movie IP and movie world at all. So they created what's it called? Is it the time traveler? The tunnel. There's an immersive tunnel in there, which that's embarrassing because I was designing this I can't remember the title of the attraction anymore. No, but it's and that was fun. And that was no movie references. We create our own stuff. And Super 78 they did the content for that. And with Riva back then we did all the concept design, but using my team back in Germany, which was fun. And then the next thing is let's do a Star Trek roller coaster.
Yeah.
Which, great coaster, Mack Ride's product. Of course, it's great. But then you think okay, last year you didn't want to do anything movie at all. Right. And then suddenly next year you change directions. And I don't know where they go now.
Yeah. Actually, I guess we've got precedents similar to the Paramount parks, kind of debranding, selling to Cedar Fair and stripping.
Most of them, they're Six Flags now, right?
Cedar Fair, actually, is our other regional operator here in the U.S.
So, speaking of almost disasters or some potential disaster, I want to talk about a real disaster that happened at Europa-Park. Is it last year? It's just a year ago. For those of you who don't know, this is how old is Europa-Park? It's
44 years.
Okay, 44 years old. And for listeners who have a favorite local park, imagine one of those, one of your favorite rides, suddenly catching fire and burning to the ground and being lost forever. I mean, I think people mourn those attractions that go away just simply because they're replacing it or moving something. But this was one of those frightening tragedies where something that your whole childhood has been going around, and this was their Pirates of Batavia. Very similar in concept to the Pirates of the Caribbean ride. So just imagine if Pirates of the Caribbean burned down. So you were involved in the park at that time, yes?
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that experience. And
I was there the day the fire was. And I was ironically, I was in a meeting with the family, with Micah and Roland Mack. And we pretty much 2 hours before the fire started, agreed what our new attraction would be for 19. And we knew that we're going to, in 19, open our Kronosar Hotel. And we opened the water park. And we said, let's do something new, of course, because we do have 80% repeat visitors. And they kind of expect to do and see something new every year, which, it's great, because you really being very, very busy, constantly developing new attractions or new restaurants, new shops, and so on. And then I will really remember being in my office with Mark when he got the call on the radio that there's fire alarm and so on. And then just being there, helping, seeing, running around, trying to get stuff. We were carrying cars away that the fire trucks could even get closer there and so on. So it were some very dramatic, and it's like nothing I think which can you prepare for such an event.
No.
Obviously, we were very well prepared and could handle it the best way ever, I guess. But that's shocking, and it's just like, and then like the day after, and then the next day, you kind of realize, what's really gone, and it was not just like Pirates of Batavia. It was like complete our Dutch neighborhood and our Scandinavian village, and that all burned down. And so it was just like, and then seeing, like out of our office, we could actually see down to the place, which is even more devastating.
Wow.
And like it was a big shocker. I mean, especially for the family, like for Roland, who really like built this attraction like with his team back then, with his own hands, and was like so much deeply involved in all the ideas and the construction, and has like memories of his father, Franz Mack, it was shocking. Like for us working there, we kind of almost like grow closer together, like to handle the situation. And then, it's like the phoenix rises from the ashes, like I think the next day. So first of all, I think it was awesome that we opened the very next day. Mm-hmm. That was just the message to send out. Mm-hmm. Because beside that really hot summer last year, but like the fire almost like did not affect like our intendancy. Like, so we could like top in 18, we had like more people than in 70. So that was great. But pretty much I got the call the next day. It's like, okay, let's sit together. Let's see what we're going to do.
Wow.
And you do have, like ideas, because it was a very old area in the park, and like certainly not the way planned you would do that these days with like talking about infrastructure.
Right.
There was a lot of gastronomy. There was like retail, and like just like, and also like 3 times more people than they built it back then. Like we're like our guests. And so like, we were thinking like doing adjustments in like the overall layout, master planning, like, like do we make it wider? Do we create other corridors, and so on and so on. But then it was very clear, and like, for the family, no, we pretty much want to rebuild it as it was.
You don't want to lose that charm and intimacy.
And so we had to do some adjustments, because obviously like building codes are much stricter and different, like 20 years later. So that happened.
No grandfathering in if you're building it from scratch again.
We really like took the old drawings, and this is like back then when like architecture drawings were made by hand.
Yeah.
So we scanned them and we transferred them in CAD, and really like tried to stay as true as possible to the old kind of look and feel. Again, like
it's almost a historic adaptation or recreation.
But like fantastic. Like we certainly made it more pretty. Again, like with nowadays technology and CNC cutting wood pieces and so on, so you certainly could like put more detail in, which again back then nobody could afford that. So which is great, because like it looks nicer. It looks different. It has a different feel, because we also needed to add actually one story of those buildings, which makes it a little bit more narrow. Like it used to be much more villagey. Now it's like more like a cute small town, I would say. Which again, like I think we
probably a little more authentic.
We like did a great job, like like translating this into nowadays. And also the biggest change was that we, like speaking of the Scandinavian village, that we created also like had like parts of Rulantica in there now. And so and that's fun, because like like we again create our own IP with our water park Rulantica, and basically making this now part of Scandinavia within Europa-Park makes it even more authentic. Obviously like we created a fictional island named Rulantica for the water park, which is like our water park the water park IP and all the happenings in the water park center about those islands. And now there's also a little part of that within the Scandinavian area, but just like where it belongs. It almost feels like natural. So I think that's kind of the new thing, and like even the improvement.
That's great.
How do you tell a story when people listen with more than their ears? Stories change lives. They make us remember, but only when they are felt and not just heard. Storyland Studios builds the impossible. We turn big ideas into reality. We tell stories in 3 dimensions to stir the senses so you can walk into places you've only seen in your dreams, in real life and real time. Storyland's artists, architects, and artisans take stories out of the imagination and build tangible dreams that leave lasting impressions and memories that endure for years. What's your story? Storyland Studios is themed entertainment, destination design, production, and fabrication. Connect with the team at Storyland Studios to get started building your impossible dream today. Visit StorylandStudios.com or call now 800-218-1932. That's 800-218-1932. Storyland Studios, your big ideas' best ally.
Can you explain the compare contrast again from the original, kind of just the level of construction, level of finish, the level of sophistication of kind of that hand built versus, again, for our listeners, kind of the new, in addition to just, more financial resources and cash flow, just the actual technical and building materials and techniques available as that was upgraded with, even though there was an intention to keep the homage to the original.
There were like pieces on the original, like for example where the Fjord restaurant were, which had like a big roof piece coming out, and there were like a pattern which were like just like repeating itself. It was like kind of a 1 by 1 meter, so 3 by 3 feet, like grid, which was just like, like a nice ornamentic pattern, which was just repeating itself, because that's like what was quick back then and like affordable. And for example, that little like piece of roof, we designed like a whole new pattern, which is like even more like uses the typical Scandinavian like ornamentic, like highly inspired with that. And so it could be like much more elaborate. Like the frames around the windows, like it had like much more detail in there. So there's like another line, another like little thing on that. So that was just like the level of richness. Obviously, like, like it used to be like timber boarded before. We added some more also plaster and stone facades. It was like much more just timber back then. Just, like again, to play a little bit with colors and like have a wider range of different architectural styles, because it's a Scandinavian village, right? So, and we're not really saying, is this Norway? Is this Sweden? Right. It's like Denmark. It's almost like offending those countries there, because we all say it's one, which they might not like, but because it's not really clear it's Sweden. It's so like, which is like nice, because you can really like now use lots of reference. You have your beautiful buildings in Copenhagen, you have your Stockholm, you have like the villages in Norway, and so just like kludging this all together and make like a nice facade of that. So we can say this is Scandinavia.
Yeah, it reminds me of Tom Morris and Tony Baxter recalling kind of the serious concern and consternation and care when they were updating the original Disneyland Fantasyland. Even though they, it needed to be updated, from these painted plywood facades to this rich, flatwork and concrete
like
work,
timber frame huts and houses. And I mean, walking into Disneyland and seeing that castle, which of course has like looked completely different, like for a little kid, and like seeing it nowadays, like building some of my own castles, like in my career, you think like, oh, that's like very simple, and like that's pretty chunky and blocky here, and so it's funny how they like also over time added more detail on that, right?
Well, wait till you see it. They've upgraded it again this year. It's really it's got some new things.
Do you like the new color scheme?
It was shocking at first, but I do. I appreciate that they did a little bit more with the forced perspective.
It's bedazzled, but we're going to be heading there in a few, so I can't wait to get your reaction.
Yeah. I want to go back in time a little bit and hear about how you got started in the industry itself, and specifically that you I think early on in the what I remember from our previous conversations is that you got to work on the sea life aquarium for Legoland, and tell me a little bit about that, because with
by
Merlin,
the way, we've got staff down there today. We were able to work on their last expansion and renewal, and we're working on it. And so
cool.
we've had some shared projects and clients with Merlin, Legoland, and the sea life stuff. But yeah, I can't wait to.
So me finishing school, knowing like seriously like back then, like being in Germany. Just like working in the themed entertainment or for themed industry was like almost like unreachable. It really seemed to be so far away. And I always had my other passion was like, like movies and science fiction, especially like miniature models. Like of course, big fan of Star Wars, but also Lord of the Rings, and really like kind of the old style, like big miniature
Pre-CG
models and like, so. And I thought, okay, this is much more approachable for me. And I actually started like going into the movie production, which hoping like later making the transition like more into the special effect field. So nevertheless, like a couple of years later, I, ended up like doing a lot of commercials, music videos as a line producer, which, like, thank God then like at one day I remembered like, this is really not what I wanted. Where's my creativity, and I kind of really like cut with that career, because but certainly it taught me how to produce things and how to be like on time, on schedule, on budget, and I could travel like back in the days when they would do music videos and commercial. You would go to the most beautiful islands. You would go up in the snow in the mountains. So like for me starting my career, this was all very exciting. But like thank God I kind of like really did like full stop and reorientated myself, and thought, okay, a great way and a great foundation of like to do that and be more creative is stage design. So I did study stage design, sculpture, and painting. So it was a majority of sculpture and painting, which was also like very hands-on. So like we can go down there. You give me a knife, and I'm gonna cut your styrofoam and then make you something
up on
pretty.
That offer. We've got some deadlines.
Make you something pretty out of that. I knew though, I did not seek a career in like sculpting or like cutting form, but I did thought like, okay, in order to later be an art director and like walk over a construction site or over a project and like I follow the philosophy. It's like easy to criticize. But like, show me how to do this better. And so I thought, okay, it would be nice to know actually how you sculpt like a rock work and how you're going to paint it and what's the layers of paint. And so you do see something and it doesn't feel right. It doesn't look nice. Like, okay, can we still fix that with paint, or do we have to start over again? And so I was really interested in like learning more the hands-on and the technology behind all those kind of imitation technology, so I did learn how to like paint a marble and like paint your wooden board and so on, which like, helped me tremendously later in my career. So doing that, I did like, picked a company, which was a scenic workshop, concentrating on movies, which I knew from my, like years as a line producer. So I used those guys on many projects. And I said, you know what, you're also talented. And like, for a movie, you do things out of plaster because, like 2 days later, you're going to crash it down and you start all over again, building something new. And if I said, if you only use concrete, you can basically do the same, like beautiful artistically things, just like, change the material. So, and I kind of started like business development for them, like going into like more like approaching theme park clients, like from theme parks in Germany, and like Merlin was basically our first client. And we worked on the dungeon in Hamburg, which just opened, so did an expansion there. And so that was like you kind of the step into the world of theme park, and like still like, like creating and physically also working there, doing the painting, doing the night shifts with the team and with the crews. And then later on, like, just being more and more responsible, just like, creating and doing concept and like supervising the designers and so on. But those still like love to be, on site and also like get my hands dirty, because I think that's really fun. So like the dungeons. So that was like Merlin back then, when they only owned the sea lives. There were a couple of sea lives in Germany, down in Konstanz, and I think Speyer, Timmendorf, and they just built the one in Berlin, and like really, and that was Merlin back then, having the dungeons and the sea lives.
That's one of the things, by the way, they really, to me, added to the aquarium industry, kind of getting away from just kind of that science center, kind of almost institutional, sterile, kind of marine institute kind of look to, adapting, including a lot of the themed environments.
And so what I wanted to say, so that was like my playground. And we then, like, I had the pleasure, like, creating, like, whole storylines and, like, designing sea lives for Merlin. And I did that for many, many years. And then, like, speaking of down here in Legoland, they asked me because, back then I did had, like some projects done in the United States and all over the world. So they wanted me to, okay, how are we going to make a sea life, like, going into the American market? It was the first sea life, first Merlin Midway sea life here in the US, and it was only like 20 minutes away from SeaWorld.
Yeah.
So why would people come to us when they can like go on the big coasters next door? And so we really tried to like do a strategy.
Not to mention Scripps Aquarium, Long Beach Aquarium.
Yeah.
The world famous Monterey Aquarium.
Monterey, exactly. So, and we were like Merlin back then. We were pretty aware. Okay, this is a big competition, and we definitely have to position ourselves. And, like, we really came up with ideas saying, like, my first aquarium, like,
right,
bringing especially the children closer and have that, like, more encounter with the fish. And, like, it doesn't need to be, like, big fish, like,
right.
So it can just be, like, small fish, but really, like, cleverly, like, tell a nice story. So, like, that sea life has been, like, really beautiful themed. I think there's some really cool areas. But, like, having some unique, bubble holes and like really like tanks where you can crawl in, crawl through and so on, because even the ocean tank is like pretty spectacular there. And of course it's beautiful to have Lego models in there, but of course there's certainly bigger tanks and, more acrylic in other aquariums, like just like very close by. So from a marketing and from a story, we try to really position it as, my first aquarium experience for like smaller kids, which might be frightened, like when they see like a big shark like approaching you, like right. through the acrylic. And I think that worked out very well. And of course, like beneficial having that beautiful site next to Legoland entrance,
right?
Which like just that Legoland park is just so beautiful and so popular. I mean, like they have like just a big number of annual pass holders. Certainly the area where it is, it's a pretty wealthy and it's area, so people go there and spend money, and then they certainly enjoyed that aquarium.
Yeah, and the whole complement there with the two Legoland hotels at the front gate.
Yeah.
I mean, and the water park. Again, we've enjoyed working on all those components, but it really does create a child-sized destination resort. On the same footprint of a lot of other just regional parks. I mean, you could really spend a couple of days
there.
And
I think it goes a little bit in the line with like a Six Flags park. Like, don't even try to compete with the Disneyland, because I think in the end it's a different audience. It's a different product, and there's nothing wrong with the product.
Carve
like,
that
rather
market niche. Yeah.
Cherish it and be proud, and like make that particular like product better and make it more immersive, like within your financially like limits and so on. And I think and I think that's also what Legoland is doing.
Yeah.
Like, because they cater, I think they do. It's a different product, so they cater maybe even the same people, but on a very different way.
Yeah. When I interviewed you about water parks and building things like that, you said a line that I'll never forget. Really funny line. He said about water and the dangers of chlorine or whatever. He said, learning from sea life, water finds a way.
Oh yeah.
And it when you bring water into any activity or any attraction, it becomes a whole entire different problem, doesn't it?
Like you think, oh, I want this waterfall, or I need like a water wheel, like to have movement and so on. And just like, always think about that twice, because like water really finds its way. Like, like working so many years for sea life and then like so many aquarium projects, not just sea life, but it's a nature, it's a force of nature.
Yeah.
And you can like, sometimes you use the best, fiberglass lining, and you work as accurate as possible, and you have the best silicones, and Jesus, there's water dripping somewhere.
Yeah,
like it's I mean, just like, it's so simple. Yeah, we have rock work here and there's a waterfall, but like making that waterfall fall beautiful over the rocks, like have the fiberglass lining under those, like it's just like dealing with water. It's so important, like, just like water. And I like talking about like water attractions, what we did. And I think there's like some of the best like types of attractions really is like a river rabbit ride.
Yep.
Because like water is unpredictable, and like you sit there and you're not getting wet, and then like next time you get wet, and like it's really, and that's the fun, because it's unpredictable. So you think you're gonna be clever and you're gonna like avoid the water and moving there. No, like, a second later, just like you get the whole wave of water in your face. And it's I think that's a fun component, where like a dark ride or coaster, you do see, okay, I'm going left next, I'm going right. Besides X2, because you don't know where you go. Which again, I think it's all the fun. It's unpredictable. That's the moment of surprise.
Yeah.
And I think the moment of surprise, you get like a lot of emotions out of that, right? And so that's what we want to do, like, get emotions out of our guests.
Yeah, I think whenever we've asked this question, what's your favorite project you worked on? Typically, it's kind of like asking which is your favorite kid in your family, and you can't really ask. So it's oftentimes people talk about it's the young girl. But oftentimes it's about the most recent. And so I wanted to just kind of talk about Rulantica just a little bit before we close up, and talk to me, because in a lot of ways that was really beautiful new park, even a new concept in the park. I wanted to have us share with us a little bit about your involvement there, and it just seems like such a beautiful place. Can't wait to visit.
Yeah, I mean that was a like beautiful experience, and I feel honored.
Doing a water park in Northern Europe,
It's an indoor water park, so there's like 90% of everything is there covered. And, I did work for other water parks, like next to Berlin, there's Tropical Island, which is like, I wouldn't really describe as a water park, because it's like jungle / accommodation / water attractions. So it's like a whole different beast, I would say. And when I was like, asked to help with the water park, Europa-Park's water park, funny enough, so there was like PGAV, awesome architecture company, and like having like great experience in water parks, and like Chip Cleary, like veteran and like water parks, like helped us designing and helped Europa-Park finding the best like product. So there's like so many things I could tell you. Like, first of all, difference is that we do have like some pretty gigantic fiberglass slides, which you typically won't find in Germany or even Europe, because the process of getting those approved, you would like, if you go like to a typical German water park or even center parks, they still use a lot of the steel slides.
Wow.
Because that's just like a product, like it has the same thickness at the top of the slide, at the end of the slide. So the German TÜV really likes that, because it's easy to certify. And the problem with the fiberglass, it is man-made. And like you use a little bit more resin and use a little bit less resin. So it like means the thickness should always not go under a certain thickness, but like it is different like in every square inch of a water slide. And getting through the painful process with the German authorities to get those approved, I think that was just like one of the biggest challenge, besides getting environmental studies for the site, we put that, and so on and so on. But like, I think like, so respect to the Mack family that they said, you know what, we want to really like offer our guests something new they've never like, experienced before, and like going to the pain of getting those things approved. And that already made it special. And so like then coming on board, like having a layout, we had the wave pool, the lazy river, and so on. And we had the name Rulantica, but nobody knew what it was. So we started with like really different concept. Like one idea was like called Rulantica B. And to me, it's so weird talk about this because now, of course, it is an island. Like it always have been an island, and like it will go in the history as an island. But early on, like it could have been a boat. We did concept. Okay, this is the explorer boat which brings you onto like certain areas in the world. So we did have like some temple structures and so on. And then we said, you know what, we want to like stay North European. So we want to like kind of, cater that a little bit because again, palm trees has been done so many times, pirates has been done so many times underwater. So we want to do like different. And I think like from a creative and design standpoint, I treat it as like a theme park. And like the slides were my coasters, the lazy river were my dark ride. And so that's like why it's almost like, it's like lands, theme park lands, which we created. And basically before we could like draw that image of that island Rulantica, we needed like, for me, like another thing was like, I did not want to have like plastic slides visible. There's certainly like in the outside of the building, you do see like very colorful slide scheme because, it's more fun when you have colors going
like
by and the sense of speed.
Yeah.
But actually in the inside, you would like see, like our half pipe is like, it's white because it's like sitting in a glacier. And like, again, like you sliding on snow. It's a little bit like, the Scrat coaster in Ice Age where you're sliding on your Acorn. So like you have your tube and you go down and you slide because it is very slippery on snow. Like, I don't know how much you experience down here in Southern California, but like, we do get some snow in Germany and we all have been like landed on our butt. And we know how slippery it can be. So like, that was like one thing. Okay, some of those slides, like we have to like, packages. And so, which is like, it's almost, because like the rides were there. So they were like picked. We kind of like fine-tuned them and like developed them. But they knew what they want, like what kind of slides. And again, like PJV and Pro Slide and Chip Cleary like played a big role in that. And I kind of came and then later it's okay, like sits there. How can we like dress it? Mm-hmm. And so it was a little bit like the backwards process. It was not like, okay, we have that island and we have to have this and this and this. And there were, for example, like the kind of more the relaxed lagoon for the adults with the cocktail bar and so on, which is like, okay, like there's nothing more annoying like being there and like hearing the kids next door scream. So there I was like, okay, I kind of want to shield that. I want to make that very intimate. And we found those great like references of like a forest where like the sunbeams kind of comes in. It's almost like, with a little fog layer, make that very mythical. So this is now our forest lagoon. Yeah. And so you like really come like develop area from area to make them also all very different. And like when you have those areas, you kind of, then say, okay, of course, like now this is now the island. And there's like the little village on a stilt, stilt village, like going over the waves. And so on and so on. So that was like that was a great fun process. And then of course having the hotel opposite of the water park, which is our museum hotel, and you check in there and you feel like one of the professors just like coming back from his research trip because the kids' bunk beds are like like a luggage, pieces of luggage. That's where they sleep fun. In, and yeah, so like that. That's I'm really proud like that I could be part of that, and I think it will come together beautiful. The hotel looks very nice, and that was really exciting.
Yeah, that's
great. I gotta follow up with. There's so many different paradigms, in that compared to the U.S. park industry. Kind of a curveball for you. What can the U.S. / the world glean from Europe, both on the parks you've worked on, projects like Efteling? It just seems like at the core there's a unique philosophy or just a different approach, whether you're talking about the Disneys or the Six Flags in the U.S.
I think maybe being certainly US parks are very original with like their type of attraction. Of course, there's a lot of like attraction prototyping and so on because there's a bigger budget involved. But like also like going back in the US park history, like, you know, there were a lot of own stories, you know, like a lot of the regional parks catered, you know, like great example, Dollywood.
Right.
You know, like don't tap into any IPs, you know, like they're just like, you know, like scenically being in this awesome Smoky Mountain area, and they do have a lot of legends and like stories which are local.
Yeah.
And that's like why they tap in. And even now with their like Wild Grove expansion, you know, which is more fairy tale and so on. But I think that's a fantastic example, like creating your own IP and making it authentic and it feels natural. And instead of like just like hang, oh, we're gonna play safe, we're gonna like pay this IP holder and we're gonna like make it that. Which again works, and it always depends. But I think that's something like in Europe, and like Europa-Park certainly makes their own IPs and like is like strong with that, and like even successful marketing it outside of the park. But as Fantasia and as Efteling, another great example. And I think like just like being more original and don't like play safe. It's almost like it's almost like playing safe. And you know, like there's a certain, of course, like if like an IP is hot and fresh, nothing wrong with like using it and so on. But maybe again, like with all the regional parks and smaller parks, which also tend to just, you know, like go the route of the IP. You know, like maybe they can go back to see, you know, what's our regions famous for, like, you know, where are we coming from, and tapping more into that, being a little bit more original in that.
I couldn't agree more. One of our designers, Mark Gildersleeve, worked on Wildwood Grove. And again, when you hear Dolly Parton's, you know, reminiscing, waxing nostalgic of her childhood, you know, without PS4s and Fortnite and screens, but just kind of, you know, finding herself in the woods, using whatever, you know, cans they found laying around or tree trunks, and again just adding that layer of childhood imagination.
And I think even like in big parks, like, you know, like Disney California Adventure, you know, like talking about like a fun attraction, right. The River Rapids ride, going to the mountains, of course, like beautiful, extensively themed, but that, you know, there's no IP. And hopefully that will stay that way because it doesn't need it.
Yeah,
you know,
it's been refreshing to see the warm welcome of the return of Soaring Over California.
Yeah, that's right.
Again, no IP, celebrating the unique spirit of people, place, that, you know, that story that should only be told in the right setting, and how that really just stands the test of time and works for multiple generations.
Well, Chris, this has been a ton of fun. We didn't cover even half of what we wanted to, so we got to have you come back and be on the podcast again. We've got some fun today, so we're going to go head over to Disneyland and check out Galaxy's Edge.
So I'm like, you know, there's nothing wrong with IPs, so I'm thrilled and can't wait to play over there a little bit.
Well, yeah, we're heading to the Club 33 Summer of Tiki. They've still got a little bit of vibe,
good.
And we're gonna enjoy some tiki drinks and mix it up. So
that'll
thanks
be
so
fun.
much for.
So sorry, listeners. You're gonna have to wait till you're on the program, and then maybe we'll do that. And again, thank you for coming out. Couldn't get deep enough, but I'm sure we will over the years. This is going to be a fun relationship. Thanks, again, Chris.
Thank you for having me.
Glad to have you here.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Oh, Auf Wiedersehen. Wait.
Heidi Klum would say, right? Isn't that her line? Sorry, Heidi.
We'll say ciao.
Ciao.
Well, Mel, Chris's passion for the theme park art form is pretty infectious. I think we hit it off pretty well with Chris.
Well, yeah, you could tell that he's a fan. Even, you know, on the trip out, he had just come from Six Flags Magic Mountain for his first trip out, which is kind of a annual Father's Day tradition. I take my thrill-seeking kids, you know, get their annual adrenaline rush. So it was so cool to get his fresh take on that. I know he's been friends with the park president out there, Neil Thurman, and then to get to hang with him and take him to our happiest place on earth in our backyard here at Disneyland, and to walk through the portal of Galaxy's Edge, Star Wars, and to get his reactions. What an epic day!
It really was. It was pretty funny. I don't know if you saw this or if you knew this, but I've been to Galaxy's Edge several times, and so I was super excited to show him things and point things out. And and he's taking pictures. And part of the way through, he just said, "Hey, I'm just gonna experience it." I realized I was tour guiding, and he wanted to really enjoy it, and I loved it. I was like, "Oh yeah, perfect." I backed off and just watched him enjoy it, and it was really, really a special opportunity to see it through his eyes.
It is one of those kind of experiences that it can be kind of overwhelming.
Yeah.
And at some point, you kind of just need to pause and take it in. I know, going through with colleagues and family and friends. I mean, really, until I was able to kind of actually sneak through by myself. I really was able to open up the receptors and take it all in at another level.
Well, Mel, the river is rising. Let's head for home, shall we? Until we sail again. Thanks, Mel. The Themed Attraction podcast is hosted by Freddy Martin and Mel McGowan. We're so grateful you take time to listen to our show. It means so much to us to know that you're interested in what we're interested in. Would you do us a favor? Can you go on to Apple Podcasts and leave a positive review? Your positive review helps other people find the show and gives us more opportunities to share more and more stories with you and people like you. Well, we want to thank our guest, Chris Lange. Follow Chris on Instagram at ChritoBerlin, which is spelled CHRITTO Berlin, and on Twitter at ChrisLA71550269. He's very active on LinkedIn too, so please find him there. Get access to more stories and interviews at themedattraction.com, an insider's look at theme park design by theme park designers. Follow the action on Instagram and Twitter at Themed Attraction. You can also connect with Mel by email via mel@Storyland Studios, or follow him on Twitter at Mel McGowan and Instagram at Visioneer. You can find me at freddymartin.net and follow my adventures at Skipper Freddy on Instagram and Twitter. Our theme music was composed by the one and only Rob Watson. Other music provided by The Lost Dogs. This episode was designed and produced by the one and only Dr. Barry Hill. Find him at barryrhill.com. You know, Mel, Barry's such a sweet guy. He used to work in an orange juice factory, but he got canned because he couldn't concentrate. His boss nearly beat the pulp out of him. Thanks for listening, folks.